Welcome, everyone, to Coleman Report Live, April 23rd edition. We have Katie Witsaki, our editor, and John Riossi, the community bank reporter at American Banker. How you doing, John?
Doing good. Thank you.
We have a ton of news today. Katie, give us an update. When is the House going to vote? And give us a timeline on what's going on with PPP.
Right. So the House came into session this morning and they began debating on the issue. And it now looks like they're going to vote around 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And it really does look like it's probably going to pass. There's a couple people who are hesitant, but it's looking pretty good right now.
Right. Yeah. I don't think there's going to be any surprises, right, John?
I would be stunned. It would be stunning if there were any surprises. So yes.
Okay, good. We reported on this. Trump talked about he was applauding the bank's success of the first round of PPP. Katie, you covered this. What was he talking about?
Well, we saw this earlier in the week as well. We're seeing everyone come out and thank the banks, especially the community bankers that have been really helpful in making sure that the PPP program was successful. And you're hearing stories from all over the place where these community bankers are really what are keeping these small businesses open. And it's the big banks, it's the all of the banks, really. It's all of them. And that's what Trump was saying last night, is he's just so grateful for all of them to make sure that all this funding gets out there and it's helping small businesses. And we are seeing a change, and it's great.
Yeah. Let's get into our special guest, John Riossi. John, you wrote a fantastic article on the second round of PPP. Lenders are expected to get a flood of applications. Tell us about what you're reporting on.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes going on right now. First of all, when the program does reopen, they are likely to get, flood is the right word. Maybe anything, they're going to be deluged. Every banker I talked about, the point they made the strongest was, in this week that the program has been shut down, they haven't been shut down. They have been, number one, scrubbing the loans that they got like crazy, all of the loans that they weren't able to submit at the time of the shutdown. So they are all ready to go. They are, they've been checked, double checked, triple checked. So they're going to hit as soon as it opens. One of the banks I talked to, Atlantic Union in Virginia, Richmond based, which has done extraordinary work with PPP. He mentioned 2,500 loans ready to go. That they think they can submit those within the first 5 hours of the program, whereas on day one, back April 3rd, they were lucky to get 100 loans through in a day with half of their staff working, attempting to get the loans submitted. The same was true at Washington Federal in Seattle, and I talked to the CEO at Huntington today. They have 1,000 people ready to go. They're a bigger bank, obviously. 1,000 people still, dedicated entirely to PPP, ready to start cranking the minute the system is turned on again. So a flood probably doesn't do it justice. And some people, and they weren't being facetious, they wondered if the system is ready for the shock, E-Trend, because it's going to be quite a shock initially.
Talk to us. Give us an update on the technical aspect of E-Trend. First of all, the House is going to vote today, and the president will immediately sign it into law. But how long will it take for E-Trend to open the floodgates?
What I have heard, and I am by no means an expert on legislation, but what I've heard is it will take about a day. The OMB has some work it needs to do, and that takes about a day once the president's signature is put on the bill, making it a law. That would, and I know I would imagine President Trump is going to sign this as soon as possible. So that would take us into Friday evening, and then it's just a question of when they will open it after that, whether it's Friday evening or the weekend, or they wait till Monday. But I can't imagine it would be any longer. I have not heard from SBA, any sort of target time to reopen. And of course, they're very cautious about talking about a bill as opposed to a law. They're not going to go out on a limb. But I can't imagine it would be any later than Monday, probably well before that. So the people I've talked to are ready to work this weekend.
And I hate to ask, this is a tough question to answer, but you're reporting that it's going to be 2 or 3 days when the E-Tran is open until the funds are exhausted?
That's what I have heard from multiple bankers.
Okay.
I mentioned Atlantic Union. I mentioned the CEO of Washington Federal. I just spoke to the CEO of Huntington, some credit union CEOs, because in addition to the loans that they've had in their queue and weren't able to get into the system back on April 16th, they have continued to accept applications, and they've continued to get those loans ready to go. Washington Federal, or I forget whether it was Washington Federal, I think it was Atlantic Union, said they had 500 plus applications, and the number was growing, and that's on top of the loans that they had left over. And you multiply that across the bank. I think the publicity of the last few days, as the vote has gotten closer and closer, and then the Senate voted, and now the House, has spurred people's interest in the program again, or at least spurred them to action. I don't think the interest ever went away. So the demand is there. The demand is there, and the bankers say it's still very, very deep. And, those ones that I talked to yesterday and today, seemed like they would be very surprised if it goes beyond 48 or top 72 hours once the program reopens.
Give us an update on the smaller community banks, the credit unions, and the smaller institutions that were allotted the money just for them.
Right. That's a total of $60 billion, and it's sort of separated into two tranches, if you can think of it that way, both of $30 billion. The first tranche is for the really smallest institutions. These are under $10 billion of assets, banks and credit unions. We have to make that clear. CDFIs, minority depository institutions, really the smallest institutions, and the hope is that they will, obviously, that they will do a better job of funneling the money to the smallest borrowers. The second tranche is for institutions with, I believe the top cutoff is $50 billion of assets. So now you're talking about the regional banks and the larger credit unions as well, that are active in the program. One thing I want to point out is one group that is not going to have access to this money regardless of its asset size are the fintech lenders. And they are very upset because, number one, most of them pointed out the fact that they do not have $50 billion of assets. They really have $10 billion of assets. So they would qualify on just based on their asset size for inclusion in the set aside. But more importantly, most of them say, virtually all of their lending is to the smallest customers. I talked to an official at Funding Circle yesterday, and he pointed out that he was talking about their regular lending, but that 60% of the loans they do are under $100,000, and 90% is under $350,000. So according to him, these are small businesses, truly small businesses, make up almost all of their clientele. Yet they're kept out of the money, the $60 billion, and they don't like that fact. They don't like it at all. However, having said that, they do intend to be very active participants in the remaining $250 billion. And I should point out they got approval so late in the last cycle that really they didn't really fully come online. I know Square was approved, and I believe PayPal was approved right before the money ran out. This time, there are a number more. Bluevine is in there, obviously Funding Circle, Square, and PayPal. And one banker said this will be a first, that they've never had access to PPP. Certainly, have never had access to PayPal, and that that will be another contributing factor to the speed of how this money is expended.
This is a great question from Gate. She says, what about the funding for the economic injury disaster loan program? Does the window open the same time as PPP? We talked briefly before the call today. Give us an update. The disaster funds are just incredible. I mean,
yes, the money is there. $50 billion for the disaster loans, and another $10 billion for the grant, the $10,000 grant that you get, right up front. Mm-hmm. And that's money similar to PPP. That's money that does not have to be repaid. The loans themselves do have to be repaid, but the $10,000 up front. And it's very interesting. Is a side note about that. I haven't covered that as much because banks are not involved in that. That is the direct lending program that the SBA does. Disaster. They do disaster lending direct. But I did talk to a business the day before yesterday here in Alexandria, Virginia, near where I live, certainly where I grew up. And they, for one reason or another, they were unable to get the PPP loans. I talked to one of the co-owners of the business, and she said her partner had in his youth, he had an indiscretion, call it what you will, and a felony on his record. And according to her, and I guess I've heard this from other people as well, given the administrative crush of facilitating PPP, SBA just does not have the time to deal with trying to make exceptions. So that is a disqualifying factor in PPP. They were disqualified, but they did get the $10,000 grant. And she said that's right now what's keeping them in business. So that money is very important too, and it will be it is part of this funding package that really totals $484 billion and includes a number of other appropriations just beyond SBA and PPP and disaster lending.
John, we got more guidance today. It came out about an hour ago from SBA that the affiliation, all borrowers must assess their economic need for a PPP loan. I imagine this is from the blowback of some of the larger corporations getting PPP funding. Have you heard anything about this?
I've just been following it I probably know as much as you do, but it is, I guess, connected to Harvard entities at Harvard and perhaps some other universities getting loans and Ruth Chris Steakhouse. And I guess, there was talk about, even though Steak Shack gave the money back, that they received money from the program as well, I believe. And it's tough because, the SBA, in way back on March 27th, as part of the CARES Act, the SBA regulations that would have sort of ushered in a much stricter approach to affiliation, or I guess returned SBA to its earlier sort of much stricter approach to affiliation, they were canceled out. So there may be some mixed messages here. And then the ultimate mixed message of this program is it's really a stimulus program. It's handled by the SBA, but it's not truly a small business lending program. Right. It's a stimulus program, and it's meant to get as many employees, to support as many employees as possible. And, larger companies have lots of employees. I really don't know about Harvard and universities. That's alien to my world, so I can't comment on that. But I know restaurants have lots of employees, and they may be big, but it seems to me that is part of the stimulus. I don't know that we should be looking at, in my opinion at least, at the companies that are receiving it. It's how the money is being spent. And if they're spending the money to support their employees, then that seems to fall within the purpose of the program. But take that for what it's worth.
It's a great question from Carla. We have some borrowers who are telling us they do not want to receive the debt relief that SBA is offering for the 6 funds. Have you heard any other banks that are taking that route, taking that option? If the borrowers can afford their payments, can they request the money and apply it as principal reductions?
I would think that just about, banks would welcome that. I have to admit I haven't paid as much attention to that aspect of this, the debt reduction, but sort of an analogous area that I have been paying attention to is I guess it's not debt forgiveness, but the programs by banks to push back payments and give some relief in that aspect. And it is really significant at a number of banks, and I can say Huntington released its earnings today, so they're fresh on my mind. For them, they have granted deferments just in their commercial loan portfolio to $6 billion, worth $6 billion. I'm sure every bank would welcome the money if clients want to pay, but I just wonder how applicable that is, broadly speaking. I'm sure that banker has a lot of great customers, and those probably are among her best customers, but I don't know how applicable that is, broadly speaking, just given the level of the need for deferments and other type of relief that's going on at banks right now.
Well, we're going to talk about that next week on Wednesday. We're going to do the second iteration of the 6-month debt relief payments, and hopefully we have a little bit more guidance. Everybody that signed up for yesterday's program, Tuesday's program, will have that opportunity to join in. I have included John's fantastic article that he published yesterday on the flood of applications. John, next week we will definitely have a different conversation. I hope you come back next Thursday. I like your weekly rotation. Everything changes so much week to week.
Yes, it does. And sort of one last point about what's going to happen, be it tomorrow or Saturday or Monday, is the other thing that will be brand new for SBA. They've never had to do this before. Is managing that. Those set-aside funds, making sure that they go to banks with the with the proper asset sizes, because I don't think they've ever done that in the past. With 7A, it's always been, and certainly so far through PPP, it's always been a first come, first serve program to banks and credit unions and lenders of all sizes. So that will be brand new for them, and it will be interesting to see how they manage to make sure that $60 billion is appropriated exactly how Congress intends it to be appropriated.
Well, listen, folks, we have a ton of questions. We will get them offline. John, we really appreciate your comments. We really appreciate you coming on the show. Katie, thank you for the update. I think we're going to be sending out more emails this afternoon when the House actually votes on it. We love the audience. It keeps growing every day, and we really appreciate the support. Give us an email and send your questions to me, joseph@colemanreports.com. We'd love to answer them. Katie, have a good day. John, have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern. Thank you, everyone.